Hello and welcome. I'm AJ,
I'm Alex.
and this is NTVN New Tech Vintage Nerds. Today we're going to talk about home labs. Do you have one? How do you start? What do you run on it? Sizing and power usage tips, tricks, and more. But
Woo!
first,
Roll that intro.
before we go into our main topic of today, home labs, what did you print this week?
Well, I haven't printed it yet, but I still need to. I actually recycled an old Philips Hue LED strip and, the glue and that thing. After if you've owned them for a while, the glue just stops being sticky.
Yeah, it
So
stops being glue.
it stops being glue, basically. Yeah. So I tried to stick it to the ceiling, and I just fell flat on my face. So I need to actually print a couple of clamps to hold it to the ceiling.
Ah, okay.
Still have to do that though. But I've already switched on the printer. Got that far.
Oh, that's good. Well, I actually didn't print anything either. I'm sorry. I do want to print a mount for my drone so I can put my 360 camera under it. Then I will have a 360 not only when I'm local, but also in the air.
An aerial 360.
That's the one.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering if that's going to work. I mean, the landing is a bit off because there's a bulge under the drone then, so I can't land on its feet.
So
Yeah, so I got to pick it out of the air, and the vans go really fast. So I really don't like that.
it will be like
Yeah, basically, been there, done that. Don't want to do it again.
not cool.
No, not cool. Not cool.
Not cool.
Well, that was a short one. Let's talk about home labs then.
Oh, does you have a home lab?
Uh, well, half a home lab.
Um, the,
I
the, what's the definition of a home lab? Anything can be a home lab. Your
well,
laptop can be a home lab.
that's actually a good point. For me, a home lab is something I can test things on for my day job. So I do stuff with VMware technology. My home lab exists of um, should exist of a virtualized infrastructure for VMware, I think, and that I don't
Well,
have.
no, well, I do, but basically, I think, well, in my opinion, a home lab is anything you can test something on, and doesn't need to be for your job. Can be anything, basically. I mean, you can install parallels on your Mac and just test something out, or I don't know, run a container on a Raspberry Pi. That could be a home lab.
Oh yeah,
Or I don't know, I've seen people who actually uh, I seriously question their common sense, but I've seen people who actually bought blade centers from eBay and then installed that at their homes, and then bought a NetApp SAN next to it, and linked that up, and basically build a complete enterprise data center for their own amusement. I mean, yeah, if you want to do that, you can do that. I mean, is that a definition for home lab? Well, it obviously can be a home lab. Why not?
yeah. For me, it's more like when I run something, it it's or I want to test something, then it's test slash home lab. When it's production, then it's production. Like for all the things I test with home automation, that's well, you could say it's a lab, but most of the time it's in production because it needs to work and it needs to work every time.
I mean, yeah. So we're professional IT guys in a daytime job.
Mm.
Usually not here, but if you're a professional, then there is a clear separation between production and test and dev and acceptance. And you have a DTAB environment, you start testing around in the development environment, and at one point you start testing it, and then it moves to acceptance, and then eventually it moves to production. But and then obviously the new iteration, my god, new iteration starts and moves through the same steps. But in a home lab, I mean, do I run production at my house? It's all
Ask
the
your
same, isn't
wife.
it?
Ask your wife if she says something isn't working that you did on it. Is it then production or not?
I, I think there is not a big difference. I mean, it's either test or it's not. And that I don't have the luxury of having a separate test and dev environment. It just all runs in the same cluster, and at some point in time, I move it from one VLAN to the next. That's it, basically. That's what it does. And
Yeah,
uh,
for
and
me that's production.
and actually on the Turing Pi board, it just it's a mix, right? I try out a container, an app in a container. I don't like it. I toss the container. I try something else. Um, is that production? Well, the moment that I link it up to the reverse proxy, it's production. Yeah. Is that moving anywhere? No, it's still in the spot where I tested it and installed it.
Yeah,
So is that test? Is that production? It's all the same.
yeah. So is
But
that a
it's
home
home
lab
lab.
then?
It's a home lab. Yeah, but I would say that I actually, well, maybe you can say I've got two home labs. I've got the Turing Pi board with the three RK1 compute modules, and I've got a VMware cluster on three hosts with
Okay.
vSAN and no NSX because it's too
Yeah.
complicated for home.
I only have a Docker host. Well, that's not true. I have a bin of all kinds of hardware that I can use to test stuff, but it's not something like it's always running and I can test on it whenever I want. I have to create a specific situation for that. When I want to test something, I grab an Intel NUC or a Raspberry Pi. I deploy the software on it and then I test it. That's something different than always an infrastructure. I mean, it sounds
So
like
that's
professional, but it's not an infrastructure that's always in place where I can go to.
Yeah,
I
so
want to
maybe
test
that's
now.
a difference, right? Maybe it's the definition of, do you have it on 24/7, or is it just lying around in the corner, and when you need it, you grab it, you
Yeah,
power it, and then you try something, and then if it doesn't work, you toss it back into the corner, or you find something else to test. But
yeah,
basically, when you walk out of your office, the thing is off.
yep.
So I never switch them off.
Well, I neither. I,
So, well, what is that then? Is that a home lab, or is that production? What is it?
yeah, well,
So we're arguing about the definition now, right? I
yeah, but
mean,
it
this
is an
is this is
important one.
semantics. This is semantics.
Well, if you say a home lab is something you test things on, then Proxmox or VMware Workstation is a home lab. For me, it is something that I can readily test something on related to my job, and all the other things are just tinkering or is production in
I
air
hardly
quotes.
do you still test stuff for your job? I hardly test stuff for my job. I just test stuff for fun.
Um, no, I even have a VMware environment anymore. It's all in the cloud now. So, well, it used to be in the cloud now. Um, no, I don't have a VMware environment, and I don't test stuff for for work on that box.
Right. So you don't test stuff for your work. So there, that use case doesn't exist.
Correct. When I want to test it, I use our work environment.
Right. So I'm not using my home lab. Well, is it a home lab then?
Exactly. That was where I was going.
So
It's not
I'm
for
using my
production.
home infrastructure
Yeah.
partially as a lab and partially as a hosting environment, um, to just fiddle around with stuff.
Yeah. I think that's um, a good definition. You want to tinker around. You want to test something, and what else it is? It's not for work, not for pleasure. It's just an environment you can test on.
So what is the most important thing in a home lab?
For me, it has to run the things I want, and it has to be quiet since it's in my office, and I don't want to listen to the fans spinning all day. And
But you've been
it's
there.
yeah, and power consumption it needs to be low as possible. Since, like we just said, I don't turn it off.
So in terms of use case, right? If you so let's turn the clock back a couple of years. So you did have a home lab. Um, what would be more important to you, the low power consumption or the performance? Because usually those two are mutually exclusive.
That's a hard one because I had a big server at home. I used to have a HPE server, and that's not quiet. That's not power efficient for at home, but it was speedy. So I think, and since I'm easily annoyed and want to do something else, I think that the performance, the speed was more important than the power consumption at that time.
Yeah, it depends. If you've got it on 24/7, then the power consumption becomes a bigger part of it.
Yeah, I just ignored it.
Well, I mean, yeah, a couple of years ago that would be okay-ish, but with the current pricing, not so much.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, I've got a 3 node super micro cluster, but those are the really small boxes. So
Mm.
what's it? I can't remember the type number, but it's a really it's a really small box. It's as big as a cigar case, basically.
Oh,
And I've got 3 of them, and they built my VMware cluster. So I run any x86 workload in there. It hosts my email. It hosts some website stuff. It does host. Well, that's basically it. I think it's the most
mm.
important part, and then it also functions as a home lab, and as such, it has a container host and the Xibo host and all that other fun stuff. A Grafana VM and an Influx VM. Although I'm planning to move the Grafana VM to a container actually,
Mm.
because it doesn't really do much apart from loading the dashboards. The actual data, so the performance hog is the Influx database, not the Grafana VM. That's not doing anything.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm trying to move a lot to the Turing Pi platform, or as much as can be done. Xibo, unfortunately, is not available as an ARM platform, so that
Mm.
falls flat. But I've transferred some other stuff to the ARM platform now, and that works wonders. But it's fairly fast, it's reliable, and low power ish.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. I mean, with 3 compute modules in there, it consumes less than 30 watts.
Oh, nice.
So that is fairly impressive. Yeah, I'm really happy with that, and it has 3 NVMe drives in it as well, so one per compute module.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that in terms of power consumption, I think is a wonder, and I try to use it more and more in terms of the hosting stuff, so that I can move workloads off of the VMware infrastructure, which is a lot more power hungry. Although it is okay-ish. Right now, my home lab is roughly 264 watts. Yes, I was looking at my dashboard. Um, so that's okay for a 3-node a cluster with vSAN and 2 switches
Hmm.
and a NAS. So basically, one, two, three, four, five, 6 devices.
Oh, nice.
That's not too bad, is it?
What was it in your prime days when you had all older hardware?
Oh, it was well over a kilowatt.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So back in the day when I really had my home built NAS with the 16 drives and the 4 SSDs and whatnot, that thing alone was 500 watts.
Wow.
And I had a physical container host which also ran on roughly 100 watts, and then the VMware cluster which was somewhere around, well, the roughly 200-ish watts, and then
Hmm.
the switches and the SAN. So that was well over a kilowatt.
Wow. Oh, you said something earlier that triggered me. You said I want to move stuff from the Windows environment to the
For the VMware environment.
Turing. Yeah. Why do you still have virtual machines running and use vSAN for it? I mean, you just said it. It's still more power hungry than the Turing Pis, or I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think I could maybe tune it down as well, but then it would get into the annoyance corner because the performance is slacking then.
Hmm.
So I don't think I want to do that. It's not on top performance. Let's be fair. It doesn't run on high performance all of the time. Well, not at all.
Hmm.
It's in balanced mode, which is fine for me right now. I know it can be fast. It can do more. It can be faster, but I don't need it. Why is it still up and running? Well, it's got a couple of workloads I'm too lazy to convert to something else.
Yeah.
Um, so it's got a couple of hosting servers on it that do email, and it's got my whole email history in it. And I really, really, really don't want to export that and move that to off to something else.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I've already deleted quite a bit, and basically the conclusion was I never missed it.
Yeah.
So any email, I mean, maybe people out there recognize that. I mean, every time you move to a different employer or to a different job or to a different project, you archive all of your emails and then you take them with you because you never know if it's practical. Let me tell you, it never is.
No.
You just drag it around with you, and at some point in time, like me, you've got 50 60 gigabytes of email. I still have the very first email I sent out from my very first employer, and why is that even useful? It's not. It's not.
No.
It's totally not. What why do I even have 50 gigs of email? I can easily delete 80% of it probably.
Yeah. Well, I often, oh well, often, I some I hardly do. Yeah, I know. I hardly do any mail cleanup, but there are times, especially when I want to switch or that I get a notice from my mail provider saying um, you can use more storage,
You're
but then
near,
you have to
yeah,
pay.
you're nearing the limit, mate. Either you pay more or we start cleaning up for you.
Exactly.
Take my money.
Well, no, I remove mail. Um, I had a time
Really?
that I kept everything, the mailing list and stuff like that. So if you want to search something, it's easy. You don't have to go to the internet because you have all local. Um, I now realize that that's not very useful because what was in a mailing list was probably old when it came out, and now it's even older. I mean, a mailing list from, well,
Yep.
15 years ago. What
You don't need that. You
exactly?
don't need that.
No, so once in a while I go through my mail and look if I skipped any mailing list just to remove all that old stuff.
I mean, it served me a couple of times in the past when I was actually reinstalling my Mac and installing an app that I've been using for years and years and years. And I was like, I've got a license for this, don't I? I think so.
Hmm,
I can't remember getting this pop up every time. So at some point in time, I've probably rented a license.
yeah,
Where did I leave that license?
yeah,
And you start digging around, and at some point, it may be in my email. And then you
yeah,
go through all of these separate folders. Oh, there it is. In an email, you received from some web shop 9 years ago is some bloody code that probably isn't valid anymore, but then you can upgrade it to the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
website
yeah.
of the vendor, and then you get a new code, and that code is valid, and then yada yada yada.
But that's useful mail.
That is useful mail, yeah, and that's why I don't toss it.
Now, mails like that I don't throw away, but all the other things like, hey, welcome to our new system. We created an account for you.
Yeah,
Well,
probably,
good
yeah.
for you.
Anyway, we're diverting because we were talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
home
something
labs.
about home labs.
Yeah, so basically, why do I run it? I'm too lazy to move off of this email server, and that thing is a monster.
Hmm,
And it's got a separate spam filter, which I talked about last time. The I replaced it. The Proxmox thing.
hmm.
So that thing is, I don't know, it's the email database is, I think, 50 gigs, and then the OS is another 20 gigs, and
Well,
it's got log files and yada yada yada. It's insane. So that is the hosting part. So the web servers don't really take much because I don't really host any active web pages. It's just some placeholders and some stuff I use internally. So that's not a whole lot. But that is still running in on the x86 platform, and it sucks on ARM. Well, first of all, the email platform isn't available at ARM at all.
hmm,
Um, the websites theoretically yes, but would have to rebuild the whole hosting part, and that's not appealing.
no, no, no.
Specifically because it's now just it works like I toss in an HTML file and it just works.
Yeah.
Um, so that's very convenient. Um, and the rest is mostly it's well I use a lot of containers. That's for that. So a lot of web apps are basically a container either running on the x86 platform because the container host at the VMware environment still has something around 24, 26 containers on it. And the Turing board, I think, has also something like 30-ish containers on it in
Okay.
total. So yeah, that adds up.
If you were going to start a new home lab today, for example, you everything crashed in burns and you had to do something new, what would you choose?
I would probably look at something that would be, somewhere a 12 gen CPU, something like that. The Core i5 ish,
Hmm,
and build maybe 2 or 3 cheap servers out of that. I mean, they are very, very efficient in terms of power usage. So if you have the right PSU added, sorry, the right power supply, and if you put in a 10 gig card, then that can easily do I don't know 10, 15, 20 watts
hmm.
idle. So that's very good.
Yeah,
And then, if you take, for instance, the what's that, the 12400 Core i5 that has 6 performance cores, the
I
thing
don't
is
know.
roughly, I think that thing is roughly $200 or so, and then the board. So for roughly €500, you'd have a server,
Yeah.
right? So for 1,500 US, you would have 3 servers. Maybe you should source a case for that, but it doesn't really need much. Um,
Would you
uh,
still go for
in
base?
comparison, the servers I use now, they were €1,000 a piece, excluding the ECC memory modules. So all in all, and they now have 128 gigs per box because that's the max. It doesn't allow for more. Um, but if I actually count that all together, that's roughly 5K in hardware.
Yeah. Wow.
Also, the NVMe drives, because they have 3 NVMe drives a piece, one for the VMware ESX, OS basically, and 2 for vSAN. So yeah, I mean it adds up, right? And
Yeah.
that's always the danger with a home lab. You never notice it. It's the same thing with 3D printing, right? When you buy the device, and then yeah, I could replace this part, and I could add that part, and I could add a bed level sensor, and I could add a filament runout sensor, and then that is a really nice color of filament, and and that one too, and I'd like to have some PETG as well, and before you know it, you spend $1,000.
Yeah. 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 I know.
And in home lab it's the same thing, right? It's always, I used to run this on Gigabit, and then just have these hosts have 6 gigabit ports, so you would create uh, uh, port groups with 1 gigabit interfaces each, and then do LACP with them, so you bind the 2 gigabit ports together.
Hmm.
But now it's 10 gig, so I've got a 10 gig switch. They have two 10 gig ports on board, so they all run on 10 gig right now in backend. But now I'm already looking at, how cool would it be if it would be 25 gig or 40
Sure.
or 100. I was looking at I think a vlog from Tom Lawrence the other day, and he had a 4-port 100 gig switch
Hmm.
for $700.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that was my opinion as well. Yeah. Okay, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, but for a home lab, if you go that route for 100 gigs, then suddenly the network might not be the bottleneck anymore.
Now your hard drives may become there, or the CPU,
Yeah.
but that is the thing in a home lab, right? There's always something the bottleneck,
Yep.
and if you replace one part with a high performance part, then the next part will become the bottleneck. So at first, it were the spinning drives. Now I'm running SSDs. So then the network became the bottleneck. So then you moved up to 10 gigs network, and then maybe to 20 gigs network, because it's two 10 gig ports.
Yep.
And now the CPU is the bottleneck. So I would need to upgrade the host. Okay, so maybe we should look at something completely different. Okay, so you would buy, I don't know, an Epic CPU, for instance,
Yeah.
74, so 7204 or something, with 16 cores. Okay, so that would then have 5 X16 slots. You could then put NVMe drives in there. You already know where this is going, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you would, and then your network would be the next bottleneck again. Okay, let's move through a 100 gig network. Then the network isn't the bottleneck anymore. No, now okay.
Yeah. Then
This is a never-ending race.
yeah.
The
I
thing is,
still.
I mean, I started with a very old dual CPU Pentium Pro server
Yeah. Well, me
um,
too. Yeah.
as a home server, basically, and I just reinstalled that thing every 2 weeks with a different OS, because I was
Yep.
just curious. um, I do not have an IT background, so one of the things that I just did to learn IT was I would install just an OS, any OS, doesn't matter which one. I've installed everything: NetBSD, FreeBSD, Linux, OS X, or, well, back in the day it was called Mac OS, and you could then hack that so it would work on an Amiga. Um, I've run OS2, BeOS,
Oh yeah.
um, Next, IRIX, um, True 64. You name it, I tried it.
Yeah, yeah. I remember I received a big deck server from one of my previous customers. What do you want to do with it? Well, I can create a TeamSpeak server on it with Linux. Okay,
Yeah, and
that's that's a
it would
machine where
consume what,
complete
1500
organizations
watts.
are running on.
And it would consume 1500 watts.
Yeah, the lights in the whole village blinked.
Oh yeah, I've been there. I had I can't remember. It was it were two servers, old compacts, the white ones,
Hmm.
quad CPU. It had these insane power supply units. It had per server. It had two separate SCSI racks with drives
Yeah,
in it, which it had 12 drives in every unit, and it would spin up every drive one after the other, and then go back to the other, go back up one chassis, and then do the other ones. I think they did the whole power up procedure. It took like 10 minutes or so,
yeah, yeah,
and then it would finally boot up, and it would have 16 gigs of RAM,
yeah. Yeah.
and it would not perform at all.
But that was the fun of it. Just and I think that's we go back to the definition of home lab. You just want to explore stuff. You want to learn more about the
Yeah.
things you want to learn.
So basically, my tip for anyone who wants to start a home lab is, start small. Take something that you can tinker with. Buy a couple of Raspberry Pis, buy an Intel NOC, buy something that is cheap that you can easily switch off, that you can toss in the corner if you don't like it. Don't spend a lot of money.
Yeah,
A Raspberry Pi is, I don't know, what, 60, 80 quid, something like that.
yeah, something.
Dollars, euros, pounds, whatever. Uh, it's not that bad. I mean, you could spend $100, €100, something like that. I mean, you would get something that would work,
Yeah,
and you can tinker with and install an OS on, and then start fiddling around with. I would definitely recommend against buying decommissioned server hardware. If you go to eBay, you can buy tons of hardware, tons. I mean, a lot of companies just, when they phase out their 5-6 year old servers, they have them lying around for another year or two for spare parts, and then they toss them away. Sometimes they are refurbished by some company, and then they sell off the parts, or they sell them directly on eBay, whatever.
yeah,
Generally, unless you are really an IT tech who likes to work with that kind of stuff, um, because you know what you're doing, and or you want to learn how to manage stuff like that. I mean, it's a good learning school, right? I mean, it's the way I learned my IT. Um, but if you're just a hobbyist, if you just want to tinker around, if you just want to, test some stuff in your home lab, or for your smart home, or whatever, something that looks nice and funny, but you don't want to run it 24/7, or you don't want to spend insane amounts of money on power, um, just buy something small. Don't buy
yeah,
refurbished hardware. It's far too power hungry. An average server, an average HP DL360, DL380, it will consume 1,000, 1,500 watts per hour easily,
yeah,
right? It doesn't, and that's just idling, right? If it's 5, 6, 7 years old, that's no problem. It will consume that, no problem, right? And yes, you can go bigger, no problem, right? There are bigger servers to be had. You can buy a blade chassis and be insane like that, and you know consume 4, 5, 6 kilowatts per hour, no problem,
yeah.
right? That stuff is available on eBay. You can buy it, they'll ship it to you. You can switch it on at home and make nobody happy
Yeah,
because it will
especially
be
in the
loud.
first house.
It will be loud.
Yeah,
It will be hot. It will be expensive in terms of power consumption, um, and your basement will be 40 degrees centigrade. Um, unless you are really into that, and you like the technology and you like to run that, I mean, fine with me. But honestly, for a home lab, just to tinker around with some stuff and run a couple of containers. Containers run on very small ARM chips, guys. Don't buy $10,000 worth of enterprise hardware.
No.
It's not required. It's not required.
Well, I want to make a small addition to that, because you can buy used stuff, but don't buy the server stuff. I mean, you can buy
Fair
desktop
point.
systems
Fair point.
from the popular brands that are excellent equipped to run all kinds of workloads.
Oh yeah.
So when you
The tip
buy free,
I gave you the other day, the HP, what's it called? HP Mini
yeah,
G800
the mini
ish thing.
desktop thingy.
It's a mini. It's yeah, exactly. It's a mini desktop. It's roughly the small. It's almost the size of an Intel NUC. Um, if you look at it, a lot of companies now toss out the Generation 6, Generation 7 CPUs. They are quite interesting because they are not too old. They are fairly power efficient, specifically the desktops, because for a company who runs tens of thousands of PCs, it's interesting to have a power efficient system.
Yeah,
Um, it's not the most powerful in terms of graphics or stuff, but it will run. I mean, it maybe it will do transcoding. I don't know, right? If you want to run Plex or MB or whatever, um, but generally those boxes can be had for, I don't know, roughly around 100, 120 euros.
yeah,
And those machines can have 64 gigs of RAM, and install Linux on it, and it will run containers all day.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Not a problem.
Yeah, and it can even, depending on what you buy, you can run a VMware software on it,
Or
or
Proxmox
Proxmox or
or
something like that.
XCP-ng or
Yeah,
whatever.
and combine it with a switch, and you can use a real, within air quotes, a real cluster where you can uh, experience all kinds of clustering
Yeah, the
solutions.
only downside those boxes generally have is that they only have one network interface card.
Yeah,
But there are ways around that. And if you look at most of those machines, specifically if they are a Gen 7 or newer, they may have an M.2 slot. And a lot of people think an M.2 slot, well, that's for a hard drive. Well, not necessarily. There are all kinds of M.2 cards. You have
yeah,
Wi-Fi cards, you have SATA cards, you've got network interface cards, you have TPU cards. The Google Corral module that is in an NVMe or in an M.2 format. So there are a lot of options. If you have an M.2 slot, there is quite there are other things you can do with that other than use it for storage. But it's very nice for storage because it's very very quick. But if your box just has one network interface card and you want to have a second one and it doesn't have a PCI Express slot, then look for an M.2 slot. That's your way to go. You can very easily add a dual port 2.5 gig NIC and add to that,
yeah,
and then you have three network interface cards, and I mean that will work wonders for you.
absolutely. You got any more tips on home labs?
Um,
Yeah,
Well,
replace
apart
your,
from what we just mentioned, a lot of that stuff you can cluster together with all kinds of software, right? Docker Swarm, Kubernetes, like we mentioned before, the VMware, vSphere, ESXi. If you still have the licenses, because unfortunately the free licenses are revoked now. But you would have Proxmox as an alternative, or XCP-ng, where
Yep.
you can run actual virtual machines. Um, and make two or three hosts into a single cluster and run workloads that way. It's if you're an IT guy, if you're aiming to become one, that is very nice stuff to try out. And or just if you're just curious, you want to know, how does that work. I'm working in this company. I know our IT department does stuff like that, but I'm just curious to know how that works. Well, I mean, for €300, you buy 3 boxes, and then you're in the game, right? It's you install it, you give it a go.
Yep.
Proxmox runs on so many different kinds and sorts of hardware; it'll probably work.
Yeah. And if you're into some hardware, I would suggest, especially when you have them in your um, work area, in your office, replace the fans with a Noctua fan set. So those are more quiet, but that's
Yeah.
already going into really tinkering with the hardware.
Well, be careful with that, because you have the fans that actually spin at a specific speed,
Yep.
or up and down, and you have the fans that would be the rotation. You have the fans that aim at having a very good static pressure.
Yep.
So there are, specifically from Noctua, you have different series for that, and you have to be very
Oh yeah,
careful
yeah, yeah.
which ones you buy.
Yep.
Otherwise, you might burn up your server.
Hey, but with a slow and not too loud fan.
If it smells, that's not good.
No. No.
If it smokes, that's not good.
No, it's not.
All
So
right.
that was the home lab. Got any other tips? I know I have no tips, so I'm betting all my money on you this week. Well, actually,
Oh
I
my
do
god.
have someone.
All right. Well, you're up then.
I'm just watching a new series on Netflix. It's the three body problem. If you're into science fiction, it's a real interesting story with, well, some sciencey things in it, like photons and all kinds of travel at 1% of the light speed. It's a whole story, but anyway, um, there's a race far, far away. Wow, that sounds like Star Wars. No, they were far away. They had some problems with their home planet, and they found a new location. And the new location is Earth. Somebody sent out a signal like we always do, and they picked it up and they responded. Don't respond if you don't want us to come to you. Well, shocker, come. Um, so it's a one season right now. I believe they are going to create a second season, and it's pretty good. Just watch the first episode and you're hooked. I watched it in 2 days time now, so that's my tip.
All right. Well, on that bombshell.
Well, yes. Thanks for listening. If you want us to talk about something, please let us know. And like, subscribe, and all the other things down below, up there, and on all the other platforms. So, thanks for listening. I'm AJ.
I'm Alex.
See you next time.